Good morning. So I didn't go to the gym this morning, so this stage is pretty high to get onto, so it's a nice leg raise, as it were. So finally, my turn, and good morning to everyone. My name is Fifi, as Sana did say, and by the way, thank you for the warm introduction. Coming into the convention center, I saw quite a lot of exhibitors, some from South Africa, some from our neighboring countries. So a really warm welcome to everyone who's traveled that extra distance to get here. You are certainly welcome. I'd like to begin the session with a bit of a preamble before I welcome the speakers. Just my understanding, as Sana said, I'm not in rail, I'm rather a journalist, but so I do look at what the industry does quite closely. And I was just thinking about what's happening in Europe right now and the energy crisis that that region is facing as a result of the war over there in the Ukraine and Russia. And looking at what Germany is doing specifically. So that country, you probably are aware, going around everywhere, just making new friends, trying to secure new supplies for gas, for its future, reducing its dependency on a current former friend, now turned enemy, depending on which way you want to look at that situation and your position on what is going on over there. So I'm just looking at what Germany is doing right now, and it's very much a reactive strategy. They've been criticized for being pretty reactive, just given the fact that they allowed themselves to be dependent on one partner for a very, very long time until things went wrong. But it's also proactive in my humble understanding, just looking at the fact that they can't change the past, but they're trying to change a future, just given the fact that energy is such a critical component for the functioning of economies, and changing the future by going around doing deals to secure a better energy pact with a whole lot more friends, as it were. And so as I came here this morning, I thought to myself that the same applies for transport. Also, transport being quite critical in the shaping of economies and how well they do and how well they don't do. So just looking at the situation here on the continent and the ease of moving around as people, passengers, and the ease of moving goods around, not so easy. If you just look at the fact that trade within the region pretty low compared to other parts of the world. And so I thought to myself that perhaps this discussion based on regional integration and how to boost it and make it a lot better for this renaissance of rail, as it were. How do we apply a proactive strategy? It's reactive in the sense that I argue that the status quo of really low intra-trade activity has been allowed to go on for quite some time. So we're trying to fix something, a problem that we have known about for some time. But it's proactive in the sense that how do we broker new friends, broker new deals, make new recommendations to shape a different future for Africa, just given the fact that transport, very important, as Sizagela said, for economic growth, really important for the inclusive growth that we're all trying to chase, and also really important for creating jobs. So with that said, I'd like to welcome the speakers to drive and help answer some of those questions and help table some of those recommendations for us. There's such a nice, intimate crowd, and I do look forward to any ideas that yourselves, as members who have traveled really far, if not from other countries, from your home. The traffic this morning was quite brutal, so do take advantage of your position of being here in this room to engage and throw in your solutions into the hat. So the first speaker I'd like to announce. I do understand that the Minister of Transport for Zambia was having some challenges getting in the room. I don't know if he's still having those challenges. I think so. So perhaps he'll join us on stage as soon as he is in the room. But perhaps beginning with the Honorable Minister of Transport of Eswatini. Is he here? That is Chief Ndla Luhlaza Ndwandwe. And could we just give him a warm South African applause? And we also have Dr. Eugenio Fernandez, who is the National Director of Concessions Economics. Thank you, sir.
Is right here.
And Ms. Respina Zinyanduko, who is the General Manager for the National Railways of Zimbabwe.
No, so we still have time.
And Rudzani Ligege, the Managing Executive for Transnet Freight Rail South Africa. So you're welcome on stage. And last but not least, Mr. John Smith. We heard from him. He opened or helped open the event this morning. He's coming back to, I think, answer a whole lot of questions that he asked in his opening address. He is the CEO of Transnamib. So good morning. Good morning. Perfect. And I think that everyone does have a mic there. Just have it ready to respond. Okay, perfect. So I suppose perhaps let's just set the scene on what the situation is looking like right now. As I said, I'm an outsider, but I was just looking at the statistics as they do pertain to the level of movement of goods and people in Africa right now as it does compared to the rest of the world. It's pretty bleak. The statistic is really low. But as stakeholders who have skin in the game, how would you, and starting with you, Minister Sir, how would you describe at this present moment in time the level of regional integration of our transport systems? Is it sufficient for you? Are you encouraged perhaps by progress that you have seen over the years? Or are you discouraged by that progress not being fast enough? And perhaps if you can just speak to what you think can be done.
Thank you very much, Madam, and my greetings to the meeting here at SARA. I would say, talking about railway. In railway, we are, I would say, in my country, mostly we are moving freight, and there isn't much passenger transport. So, looking at that, as I see it, we haven't reached our full potential. I would say we still have a room for improvement, because with our modes of transport, we have the road and the rail. So some customers would believe in transporting their goods on the road. So I think we need to improve on our railway in terms of showcasing how best we can serve our customers, so that we move some of the goods from the road to the rail. Because at times we think the two modes are at competition, when in actual fact they have to complement one another as opposed to competing. Because for goods to move from a point of production to the railway depot, it has to go through the road. So, and at the same time, having the goods being transported on the road, you'd find that we are moving heavy freight on the road, and that damages our road infrastructure. And you find that our customers are driving through the road, they carry these heavy loads, and they get penalized, and they have to pay. So if we as railway would position ourselves and advertise more and showcase to our customers that we can do better in terms of transporting their goods, I think that would help, because there's a lot of efficiency when you look at our railway. There's little accidents that you experience on the railway, and we can carry as much as we can when it comes to freight. I'm talking mainly of freight because we are doing freight as a country, but we are looking at also considering even passenger. But the challenge is that maybe our country is small, but there are technical people who can really look at that and see how feasible it is that we get into that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I like the point that you made, sir, about doing better, because I think the strategy that you're talking about, the from road to rail, has been one that's been in the making for some time. And I think that the case for rail, it's a no-brainer for people in your industry. As you said, sir, you can move a whole lot more, probably at lower the cost. Right now, we're in this environment whereby we're worried and we have to take action against emissions, so it's safer from an environmental point of view. But problem is, it's not always available, which is why we are seeing a lot more goods on the road than is on the rail. But I want to come back to you and just ask about the strategy to try and address that. But Eugenio, just your view right now of the state of play of rail in Africa, freight rail, perhaps specifically, how far we have come and how far we still have to go.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Minister of Transport of Angola, we would like to thank the invitation for SARA conference. Angola is here present with a big delegation because we strongly believe that together we are better. Yeah. Regarding your question, I will give you an overview of the stage that we were before and what we are going now. We did a lot of investments on railway, but today we are looking for more efficiency. And that's why we are engaged now with the private sector. We are doing some concessions on the railway to improve the freight, because we know that there is a huge demand on inland countries, DRC and Zambia, and because of our geographical position, we can connect two oceans, Indian and Atlantic. And that's why today what we are doing is engage the private sector. We award a concession for 30 years to Lobito Corridor, that for us is the main corridor of Angola that connects Angola to DRC. And we are working also on a process for a free trade zone between these three countries, Zambia and DRC. And we strongly believe that with these initiatives, we can improve the capacity of freight and also the efficiency on our region regarding the railways. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And just some of the opening remarks from you, ma'am, Ms. Respina. So we heard Sizakela just mentioning the vision of SARA, and that's ultimately for rail to occupy some 40% of market share, which is currently not the case. It's way below that, so there's room to go. But I'd like to ask for your honest view as well as to what has happened so far and what still needs to happen. Because often it's said that as Africans, we tend to focus too much on the negative and we tend to talk ourselves down so much. And that's why I'm asking a balanced question as to the good and the not so good right now as it does pertain to rail, in your view, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. As SARA, yes, we are looking at increasing the market share for the railways to around 40%, but there's a lot that needs to be done by the railway administrations, both individually and collectively, so that we can achieve whatever we want to achieve as together as a team. SARA is part of their effort to achieve usage of railway. They are taking a corridor approach where they are encouraging countries, railway administrations, to work together on a corridor approach to ensure that we tap into the business that is currently being transported by road. So like the North-South Corridor initiative that they are taking, that will also assist us to tap into the market share that is that we are intending to get as railway administrations. There's a lot that needs to be done. Harmonization of rates and everything for us to be able to take that market share. There's a lot that we need to do, but we are walking in the right direction because there are several initiatives that we are taking, including pulling of resources together to attend to some of the issues that need to be done for us to be able to achieve the desired results. Because we have situations where we have infrastructural problems, which at times hinder the turnaround time of railway transportation. We need to pull resources together and maybe do some funding, and then the repayment can be done from whatever initiative, the corridor approach initiative that would have taken, that will assist from all the railway administrations, because we can have a vision where we are saying we want to achieve a certain percentage, but as countries, we have our own different challenges that we need to address both individually and collectively if ever we are to give an efficient service, because the railway service is both a combination of tariff and efficiency in terms of time, turnaround time. So we will need to address all those issues as member countries so that at least we give a seamless and efficient service to our customers. Thank you.
Okay, and I look forward to finding out maybe the thinking of how you plan to address some of the challenges that you have mentioned in the next round of questions, ma'am. Rudzani, I think that most people in this room are aware, you know, at the start of the year, you're like, oh, this is going to be my year, this is going to be my year. Towards the end of the year, that's when you realize that, okay, no, this wasn't my year. And I'd like to make the argument that perhaps it's been a tough year for Transnet, a really tough one. I don't know if you're thinking that this hasn't been my year or not, but we've seen some of the difficulties. It's well publicized in the media and probably the media across the continent as well. Just your reflections then, perhaps, so we just have a better understanding of how the year's been for you as Transnet Freight Rail, but also more importantly, just your assessment of the lay of the tracks right now and what you're planning and where you're seeing areas in which you can do more.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think you're raising quite a important points. I think as Transnet, as you have rightly said, we have not been in a good space, right? It has been tough. I think the COVID hit us hard. The floods and the continuing scourge that we have of vandalism and theft of our rail network. Basically, within Transnet, there's three key risks that we see, or key objectives that we really need to solve for, which is investment in our infrastructure, point number one. Point number two is really how we deal with our locomotive challenges. And thirdly, how we deal with the issue of security. So those are the three key things that we need to grapple with. But I think, as you have rightly said as well, I think the positioning of South Africa, we have access to, a number of ports, and we see ourselves as really playing quite a key role in this whole thing of, regional integration. There's already, I think there's a question that you asked, in the beginning about whether are we moving in the direction, what is the, what is the trajectory that we're taking. I'm of the view that I've seen fresh breath of air in terms of initiatives that we are doing with different, railways, that are neighboring us, that are really moving us in the right direction. I mean, just to give an example of, what we do with CFM as an example, where we're running seamless trains, where we basically are nullifying borders to say, from a logistics point of view, logistics is about, ensuring that, I think my colleague spoke about efficiency. Efficiency is quite key. Turnaround time is quite key. So anytime you stop a train, it then impacts negatively on everything, right? So we are trying to get rid of the borders to say, how do we make sure that trains run seamlessly and they don't, get to be impacted by the borders that we've created. But I think also the other point as well, is the issue of investment. Railway is a long-term business, and we need to find different vehicles of ensuring that we invest well in railways. We have not, for the longest of time, if you look at SADC, we haven't built any new railway lines, and those are some of the things that we need to address. The volumes are there. There is no shortage of volumes. I think as SADC, as Africa, we are blessed with a lot of minerals. And yes, we do have a special challenge. That is why rail becomes key in ensuring that we use more rail to ensure that we reduce the cost of doing business. So, but all of those needs to be, it's a question of, how do we create efficiency before we start capitalizing? So the little that we have now, how do we utilize it to make sure that we sweat it and we are able to generate more to try and build, new rails? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks. Which is kind of picking up from some of the questions that you raised, John, in your opening remark around how do we become better and improve the level of capacity and assets currently right now on the tracks, and how do you improve the level of speed right now? How do you create heavier trains? As I said, you asked a lot of questions. I tried to cram them all. How you even become a lot more customer-centric. And I just would like to give you the opportunity to maybe share with us your thinking on how some of those things get done.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the most important is you need to have a plan. And what is our plan at SARA? Where do we want to go? And how do we put that in place? So if I could just use Namibia as an example, since I'm representing the minister. So from that perspective, Namibia is 32 years old. 32 years that we now independent. So after independence, we took a decision, policy level, to develop Namibia as a transit country or a alternative trade route for the Southern African countries. And also bearing in mind that at that time our population was about 1.5 million. So we had to find some other opportunities in terms of creating economies of scale. So what we have done is we've done a lot of investment in the port, a lot of investment in the road, a lot of investment in terms of aviation, but not so much on the railway. And this is what we're focusing now. We're trying to preach that, we're trying to lobby that, and you can only lobby that through providing the real facts on the table. As to, I've put a slide to the cabinet ministers 2 years ago, and I told them, you've done very well in terms of our roads, because Namibia's roads is ranked as #1 in Africa, but you've spent 10 times more on road than rail. So what are you going to do about it? I just asked a question. And then the next year we started to get funding in terms of rail infrastructure. So what are you doing about that? And what do you put in place? And how do we change the picture through SARA in terms of the railways to as I used it a month ago at another session, and I said, we need to make the rail more sexy. That's what we need to do, because the rail is seen as old, is seen as conservative, but how do we do it? So from our perspective, we have now done those investments, and we have created a lot of forums with the neighboring countries. From a rail perspective, of course, we have our traditional link into South Africa. We have built the railways up to the border with Angola. We've done our feasibility studies up to Zambia, up to Botswana. So we're busy with those projects. So we are using that perspective in terms of our strategy to move forward. And this eventually will allow us in the region not just to make the connection of the rail where the market share now is less than 10%, which is almost a joke if you look at it in terms of the value that it can add. And also, where do we then take it so that eventually not just connecting the rail, but also having alternatives. Because once you have alternatives to get into a country in terms of imports and exports, it means that you have real competition and you have real options in terms of reducing the cost of trade, which is going to impact each of us here, sitting here as consumers. Thank you.
Thanks. So kind of saying something similar to what Ruzani also said, just looking at where the money has been going and where the money has not been going. And you took your government on in terms of the fact that not enough money was going to rail at the time. It sounds like the picture is changing. But I'd like to understand from what you see, not only a South African perspective, just given the fact that the tracks of Transnet to go quite wide, but in terms of a regional continental perspective, why isn't a lot more new money going into building rail? Sure, feel free to answer it, John,
Yeah.
and Ruzani, perhaps you can add as well.
Yeah, so the answer is very simple. That we have not promoted rail. And with the history of rail, there's been a lot of bad things that has happened. But you need to change that perception. If you look at you as an individual, you in your role, you are a brand. So you need to protect your brand. And you need to promote yourself in order to move forward.
So you're
And this
saying
is,
Sarah hasn't promoted rail enough when you say we have not?
no, I would say in terms of rail in totality, that's what we haven't done. We haven't come forward. We are always very happy to be the second, the third, the 10th in the queue. We need to push ourselves forward to say, here we are also important. And most probably the most important. And
All right.
that's what we need to do in terms of our strategy, but we need to have a plan.
All
You
right.
cannot just stand up one day and do it. You need to have a plan and focus on the plan and move yourself forward in the queue so that we can be the winner at the end of the day.
All right, good,
Thank you.
got you. Well, thank goodness for social media, because feel free to promote all the way in terms of the conversations that are being shared right now. What's the hashtag? The hashtag, we'll just follow Sarah on Twitter. Just feel free to promote, as John did say, the cost is your data. But Ruzani, just jokes aside, because I want to know, perhaps maybe is there no attractive projects for money to finance rail right now?
Yeah, I think one thing I can share with you is that given what has been happening, you mentioned what is happening in the Ukraine, Russia, we have seen the kind of coal prices that we've never seen, and what the industry is crying for is our ability to take advantage of that. And that ability has been hampered by rail not being able to, be well positioned to move out as much coal as we can. Certainly after this, the kind of noise that has been made is really going to put rail in a different pedestal. And it is now clear that the role that rail plays in terms of foreign direct investment, given this situation that I've just shared now, will get the government to start thinking differently about how we invest in rail, So, of course, you are right. For the longest of time, I think as South Africa, we've been, we had many other challenges that we had to deal with. And I think the view was that, as rail, we've got more than enough that we should, as I've said, I spoke about optimization before capitalization, So I think the issue that we're currently having in South Africa is more like how do we optimize what we have, which is a different discussion when you start talking about regional, integration, because in the region, yes, 80% of the rail in Africa is in South Africa, so we've got more than enough, but it's a question of how do we use what we have currently, and I think that's the discussion that are going on to say, how do we make sure that rail is well positioned to take advantage of the rail network that we have inside? But I think, yes, there's still opportunities to say, how do we also take advantage of, creating links with other regions. As it is now, we are in talks with Botswana. There's a link that we want to create with Botswana where we are able to move a lot of coal in Botswana that we want to take advantage of, the ports that we have within South Africa. So I can say the movement is really there to get to a point where we start investing in rail. And I can clearly see, us moving in the right direction in terms of people taking notice now of the importance of rail in the South African economy.
I guess it depends on speed also, though. It's quite important, just given the fact that, yes, things are really good right now for the mining sector. We don't know when the turn is going to come. And it's looking at the reality to say that there is a big opportunity cost that has been paid by the country as a result of not being able to get as much goods out of South Africa. Perhaps I can even make the argument to say the rest of the continent, just because of the fact that the rail wasn't working to its best potential. And Respina, it comes to what you did mention around infrastructure and the fact that, there is a big infrastructure funding gap that needs to be filled. You mentioned the fact that, the government was spending there and there and there and there. It's probably still going to be the case, just given the fact that the pandemic and everything else, now this cost of living crisis and the inflation, it has made things difficult for a whole host of sectors. So I imagine that rail will still have to compete in terms of priority with many other sectors still. So Respina, then what are you saying about the potential or the opportunity or possibility of finding new money elsewhere? Yeah. You'll probably tell me it's about inviting the private sector. Yeah. Right, to the table to help fund the infrastructure funding gap. So what is the message? There's a lot of suits in this room to the private sector right now. In your view, where is the opportunity to invest in private in infrastructure on the continent? Yeah,
I think maybe if
you can go ahead, and Respina, you'll just weigh in after.
Yes. So I think you touched on quite a very important point because I think one thing that we managed to share with the government is the importance of rail in terms of enabling the economic growth. I think that message has been well received, that rail has got a multiplier effect, in terms of what we do. So that part is, and the fact that the government is starting to pay attention to that, it means we then are able to enable the economy to start growing and creating more jobs, right? There's one point that we need I think we need to pay attention to. But I think also the other point that you raised is the issue of, how do we, I think maybe just remind me the last portion that you've raised.
So what I want to say is that just in this environment whereby there's competing interests still for money.
Correct.
So how,
yes.
who are you talking to right now about helping to plug the infrastructure gap?
So what we've been, I think if you look at the white paper is very clear on third-party access. So we've already have made inroads in ensuring that we bring in third party into the space of rail. We are quite advanced in that. That's point number one. I think point number two is that we have also made it clear that the private sector is quite key in bringing new money into this environment. And what we have seen is that the kind of project that we currently engaged in, if you look at the ports, even in the rail environment, we've opened up for private sector to say, let's bring private sector in to make sure that they're able to help us not only with money, but also the technology, that we need to bring. I think John spoke about, how do we make railways sexy? There are technologies out there that can make rail and really revitalize it in such a way that we are able to, make it to compete with other, modes out there. But I think that definitely the role that private sector plays is quite an important one, and we need to take advantage of that.
Okay. So then let's stick with the theme of how to bring sexy back into the rail. Yeah. Respina, how do we make rails a sexy industry to invest in, particularly from a private sector point of view? What do you think needs to happen?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the participation of private sector in railway business is very key. In Zimbabwe, we have done quite a number of triple Ps that are at different stages of implementation. As you may be aware, Zimbabwe is blessed by a number of mineral resources, quite a lot of mineral resources. We have the coal fields, we have the lithium, we have chrome, we have everything. So we have a lot of mining business that is currently ongoing, especially with the coming in of the Second Republic. They opened quite a number of mines under the Zimbabwe's Open for Business mantra. And because of that, we have big mines that have opened and that we expect to be operational by 2023. The likes of Dinson, that is in Mvuma, in the Midlands, where we expect an output of close to 1 million tons per year. And we are engaging so that, number one, they can do the construction of certain portions of rail. And number two, they'll also provide rolling stock, and then through that we can then do settles through railage. We have also invited other companies like Eagle Canyon, which is also opening a big mining investment in Darwendale. And they are also coming in handy in terms of investment, both in rolling stock and also in terms of attending to infrastructure. We have also opened, we are advertising for the private sector to come in and participate. We are working together with Zambia on Lionsden Kafue line, where we intend to extend our railway line from Lionsden to Kafue in Zambia so that it can connect from to the railway line from Lusaka. That will allow our customers to transport their goods from Mozambique port right through to Zambia, through Zimbabwe. So we are doing a lot in terms of involving the private sector. So that one, we are also pursuing an option of having it as a concession. We already have a running concession that is BBR, Beitbridge Bulawayo Railway Line. And we also expect to involve the private sector on the Nakala Mwatize Railway Line, which will also connect from Harare to Mwatize Nakala. And that will also allow us to create shorter routes, because that is one of the challenges that we are having as railway. We need to create shorter routes to the ports so that our customers can get the best advantage in terms of both turnaround time and also in terms of tariffs. So we are doing a lot in terms of trying to ensure that we invest in railway business. We have also engaged the government. Over the years, I would like to agree with my fellow colleagues here. Railway has been neglected, and as Zimbabwe, some may know that we have been working on roads rehabilitation. And roads rehabilitation itself without a functional railway system is just as good as nothing. Because within the next 5 years or so, those roads would have been damaged by haulage trucks. So railway would then have to come in handy in terms of preserving those roads. And the government has realized that without an investment in the railway, their efforts on rehabilitation of roads may come to a naught. So we are also having an investment through government, what we call public sector investment programs, PSIP. And they are disbursing money into the railway system to attend to mainly to the infrastructure issue. So we have gotten PSIP in the budget of 2022, and we are also getting PSIP in 2023. Also, the government of Zimbabwe is working on capacitating railways through short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans.
Yeah.
And their short-term will see investment in rolling stock and wagons. So basically, that is what we are doing to involve both the government and the private sector in ensuring that railways is capacitated and we perform our mandate in line with what we call our Vision 2030 as Zimbabwe. Thank you.
But how easy has that been for you to do? So your economy right now, I mean, the inflation there, it's quite terrifying. And you look at that and you're trying to, calculate your risk return for a long term, because I imagine that rail is a long term investment, and you probably scratch your head and you think once or twice, depending on the kind of incentives that are on the table to ensure that your investments in the space is safe. And Eugenio, it's similar to you, because inflation in your country, in Angola, is also pretty frightening. So in terms of the incentives or added incentives that have worked for you to crowd in more private sector participation, what would you say that has been?
Okay, in terms of inflation, those who have been following Zimbabwe inflation, I think you can see that it's the currency is stabilizing now. Our Reserve Bank has put initiatives in place which has seen the significant reduction in inflation for the past 3 months. And even if you follow the auction rates, you see that there's no significant difference between the official rate and what they call the black market rate. So the economy is stabilizing in terms of the currency. That is number one. And number two, where we are involving private sector, we are involving them in concessions which are connecting to the ports. So basically, those are normally paid in foreign currency, because mines, by their nature, they produce minerals which are in most cases sold in foreign currency. So in terms of railage, they are also paid in foreign currency. So the issue of inflation, whether it, despite the fact that it is stabilizing, they also not be affected in any way, because their payments will be in forex.
Okay, got you. Eugenio, also, I mean, with the Angola story, I mean, you can reflect on what prices are doing. But I think that since you guys got your new dawn under your new president, it has been notable what you're trying to do in privatizing a lot more industries, and I imagine that rail is one of them. So what's worked for Angola in the private-public partnerships that you have put on the table, and in the concessions that you're currently busy with? What is working for you that perhaps you can share with the rest of us?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just to highlight that this 5 years mandate, this new 5 years mandate, on our sector, the investment will be railways. Yeah, our budget will be most for the railway projects. And what we are doing for the railway lines that need to be repaired, we are investing, and the next step will be the concession to involve the private sector. For example, for this Lubito corridor, the concessionaire, they have an option. They have 30 years for the concession. If they link the CFB, the railway of Lubito, of Benguela, to Zambia, to Jimbi, we will extend for 20 years more the concession. They will invest on the workshops, rolling stock, training centers, and that's why we are signaling and telecom, and that's why we are sticking with the private sector. For example, the next step will be the railway of Moçambique, that we will do the same process. We will do the concession, because the 3 main lines are connected to the 3 main ports. And these 3 main ports, we are concession also the terminals to private operators. For example, Luanda, we have Dubai ports, and we have Apemoller with us today, and this connected to the railway of Luanda. We will improve this line, and then we will concession to the private sector. We are doing international public tenders for these projects, and we are also aligned with mining sector and agro-business, because internally we have a huge potential to increase our railway network. And we have also some initiatives to connect the 3 railways, main lines, because they are not connected. And these are the projects that we have also in our pipeline. Will be public investment projects, and then the concession will be always for the private sector. This is what we are doing. For example, the privatization in the government in Angola is is looking for the private sector on many fields, not only in the transport sector. For example, we have our main carrier, TAG, is also in the privatization pipeline, for example. And because we realize that we need to be together with the private sector to get more efficiency, to release some investments that the state is doing for other sectors like education, public health, and so on. That's why, for us, the railway in these 5 years is extremely important. And I believe that with the first concession that we have now for 30 years, will be a game changer for the region.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dia, just opening up the floor to questions. If you have, you can just indicate with your hand. I think that there should be mics that are coming around if you do. But Sir Chief Ndwandwe, just coming back to you, picking up on the point that I left you at, and it was around how do we ensure that a lot more goods that are on the road right now that are fit for purpose for rail get there? And as Eswatini, what do you think it's about legislating that happens? Are there any policy changes that need to follow? And would you say that the rail is ready right now to take all the stuff that's on the road?
Thank you very much. I would say the railway lines that we have now can take far more than what it is doing now. And then coming to the question as to what are we doing to move the goods from road to rail, it is a question of improving efficiency within our railway in terms of improving the network, which that can be costly, but we are really working on it as we are, our neighbors being South Africa and Mozambique. So we need to have proper connectivity between the two countries so that we reach that efficiency. But even now, as we are, we have a good relationship with TFR in South Africa and CFM in Mozambique in terms of how we cooperate as organizations so that we help serve our customers the best. We have agreements with TFR that, yes, they are not cast in stone. They do need some improvements here and there. And we also have agreements with CFM in Mozambique. And recently we've signed a similar service agreement with CFM in Mozambique. And it has seen a lot of improvement. So there isn't much delays in terms of transporting our goods from one country to the other. So the main thing to achieve here is to improve on our efficiency. That is cooperation between countries and work, that will feed into the regional integration that we are talking about, so that we have efficiency for our customers. And then when we talk international integration, I think SARA is very instrumental in working on that, because we have so many countries that are working with SARA. So that is what I can say we are doing as a country. And we have a big railway line that we are working on constructing from Matsapa to Lothe in South Africa. So we have an agreement with the government where the two railway companies are working on. Tenders are already out for potential financiers and contractors that are going to work on that line. So we want to have the best connectivity within the country so that we fit easily to our neighbors in all directions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just an indication if there are any questions from the floor right now. Okay, there's a gentleman there in the front. Okay, there's a few. I just want to ask one last question, and maybe to the panel, if you can answered briefly. So basically, we've heard a lot about what you are all trying to do within your respective countries and within your respective industries, where the challenges are, how you're trying to solve for them. But someone said to me, to really boost regional trade and increase the connectivity of our rail, you cannot do that if the continent doesn't industrialize to the full scale. You spoke about all of the goods that are coming out of Swaziland or being moved on Swaziland Rail right now. I mean, you spoke about all the wonderful commodities that you also have, Respina, but it's all raw stuff. And it leaves this country and it leaves this continent and there's no value add. And until we have a situation whereby we're adding value to a lot of our soft and hard commodities, you'll never really have the level of full regional rail integration that we desire. What do you think about that? Do you think that's too far-fetched, that you can still achieve it, even if there isn't, the kind of industrialization that we desire? Or do you think that we can't? And if we can't, what has to happen, sir?
Yes, I think that is also another topical issue, that we always export our goods raw as opposed to beneficiation. Make sure that our products that we export are finished goods. But now that doesn't only involve the railway, it involves the industry itself. So there has to be a government policy in terms of improving our products so that we not export them as raw and export them as finished products, so that we realize more money than it is currently.
All right. John, what do you think? And about, the potential of other industries to just mushroom around that as we beneficiate a lot more and ultimately feeding into rail?
Yeah, so the railways are actually an enabler of the economy. So once you get the railway right, it will enable a lot of other opportunities where we can, for instance, say from a continental perspective, this is what, if the south is linked to the east and the east is linked to the west and we are also linked to the north, it will provide other opportunities in terms of certain centers for sort of specialization. And I'm just talking about freight, but it also creates other opportunities in terms of passengers. We always talk about Cape to Cairo, which is a dream in terms of road, but if it's rail, just imagine you can eventually, if there's a fast train that you can take from Cape to Cairo, it's going to be an overnight train. And that's why we need to invest more in rail infrastructure and of course rolling stock, which will then enable the economies and advance our economies to the next level.
Okay. So fix the rail first is your message. Let's get some questions. Just let us know briefly who you are and who your question is for.
Okay, thank you, Program Director. My name is Stevenson Gubane from Eswatini. First of all, to thank the ministers and their representatives to be here at this conference, to the panel discussions that they have had, very interesting indeed. I just want to comment first to say, what one has observed is that obviously the use of roads has intensified, and actually it will not be a solution for our economies in this region or in Africa as a whole to grow, because a growing economy produces goods for local or regional use and export. The inter-Africa trade movement, we will not realize it. What you'll find is that if the investment is biased to road, and you are going to find these roads, no matter how good you make these roads, every 10 years, you are going to rehabilitate and upgrade the roads at a far higher expense. On the other side, we have rail infrastructure, which, yes, it needs rehabilitation and also expansion. And what is good about rail, the operators of the railway systems, they preserve the rail. Rail that we have in this region, believe me, is over 60 years. Same rail that was laid down. What does that mean? It means that it's a long-term investment, and yet actually the bigger solution lies with rail. At the end of the day, of course, it's integrated transport system, so that in this region, or Africa as a whole, between countries, we are going to achieve. We all know for economies to strive, there's going to be movement of goods. It will always be in the long term. So really, I'm happy that our ministers are here and their contribution. I hope that we are going to pay more attention into investing in rail. It is the solution. Thank you,
Okay.
Program Director.
Thank you. So I hope as you are promoting, or if you've just promoted rail to the converted here in the room, you also shared some 48 or 100 and something characters on social media as well to spread the gospel of your industry too. But any other questions or comments? All right. Oh, okay. Okay, so there's a gentleman there who already has a mic. If you can just stand, sir, and briefly tell us who you are and your question, who it's for.
Good morning. My name is Paul Soto. Thank you, Program Director. My question is in terms of regional integration. There was the issue of a bilateral agreement. I just want to check how far are they in terms of signing that bilateral agreements that you will outline the funding model within SADC region.
Okay.
Thank you.
Minister, I think that you are best to answer that. I don't know if you're privy to those discussions at the table around those bilateral agreements. Can you pass any comments as to how far things are at this stage?
Thank you very much. In our case, that is Eswatini, we do have agreements between our neighbors, that is the Republic of South Africa and Mozambique, and we are operating following those agreements that we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Zani, do you know anything about those agreements, just given the fact that Transnet's rail is the majority rail on the continent right now? Have you heard anything from your office?
Yeah, I think it's a bilateral agreements. I think it's a continuing thing that we are engaging with, most of the African countries, our neighbors as well. Already, there are those that I know, I think between us and Botswana, as you've heard as well, CFM, Mozambique, basically SADC, I wouldn't say there is any country within SADC that we don't have any bilateral agreements with. I think the question then is, how do we then advance those and start making sure that they start meaning something, rather just a piece of paper?
Okay. Yes, sir?
Hello. Good morning. My name is Catarino Pereira. I'm the CEO of Regulatory Agency of Transport of Cargo and Logistics of Angola. My questions go to Mr. John Smith. Mr. John, the logistics infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges that African countries face in order to implement the free trade zone, as well improve the cargo transportation via railway. What is the SARA strategy as an African organization has to help overtake this situation on the region? Thank you.
So from a SARA perspective, we do have a 5-year strategic plan. And one of the objectives of this strategic plan actually focus on supporting the intra-Africa trade. If you look at the continental level, that figure is around about 15%. That's the trade where countries in Africa trade between each other. So there is a specific focus on that, which then speaks to the initiative of road moving freight from road to rail. And these form part of our discussion as SARA in terms of also then how do we get these bilateral agreements in place? How do we extend our railway lines? And how do we optimize in terms of carrying more freight by rail? But of course, one of the initiatives that needs to be driven much more stronger is really the issue that we heard earlier about the investment in railways per se. Because this is really where there is a major lack. It's very interesting if you look at the investors or the investment, the confidence in investment in railways, that you will see if you Madam President, if I can use Transnet as an example, you have a pension fund, and this pension fund, the fund is investing in, of course, different vehicles, but why can this fund not make a decision that the majority of those funds are reinvested into the rail, but we're very comfortable to invest that in the private sector or other initiatives. So these are the policy decisions that must be taken, but it's for the railway and for SARA to drive this process and to push this so that this can become on the agenda and us being able to lead it that way. As our slogan say, together we are better. Thank you.
All right. So can I throw that question back at you as a CEO? What do you think SARA should do just in terms of crowding in further infrastructure investments?
Okay, thank you. So, you know, one of the most important thing is the investment. You know, but we have to start talking each other. One of the problems is in Africa, we develop, we make our strategy in each country without taking into account what the other country is doing. So if we don't talk each other, it will be very difficult, you know, to put together the projects to develop the continent. So when we go out to ask for investment, why we don't, instead for us to go alone, why we don't go as an organization, as let's give an example, as a SARA, you know, so it's much easy for the investor to understand, you know, from the A to Z, how they gonna invest.
Okay.
You know, this is my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's great. I think that's it. Sizakela's writing notes. I think she thinks it's great too. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Manuel. Thanks for the opportunity, but I will speak in Portuguese.
Oh, não falo português.
In SADET is 4 languages: Portuguese, English, French, and
Do you have an interpreter?
Swahili.
With a mic, please. Is there an
My
interpreter?
question is Mr. Eugenio. Okay? Obrigado.
Thank you.
Engenheiro Eugênio, ouvimos aqui a falar
Engineer Eugenio, we had here speaking
sobre a estratégia que existe do governo de Angola
about the strategy that is existent from the Angolan government.
e gostaria de ouvir o que é que está previsto na perspectiva não só do transporte, mas também da logística ao nível do Codó do Lobito.
We would like to hear here what is the government's perspective regarding the logistics, not just for Angola, but in particular for for the Lobito province,
Isto tendo em conta a integração regional.
taking in
Obrigado.
consideration the regional integration.
All right.
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Gino?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the strategy of our government through the Lobito corridor is that the project, we look to the project as an integrated project. We have the ports, we have the railway, and we have the logistic platforms through the line, the main line. Because, for example, we launch a international public tender for the border, for the platform in Luau, in the border of DRC. And we have also on the line in Wambo, in the center of the country that has a huge potential on agribusiness. But all these logistic platforms, we are engaged the private sector. And they, as a government, we will do only the basic infrastructure. And they will develop all the logistic platform. That's why this corridor, we have integrated all the sectors to get the potential and efficiency in the next coming years. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay. I hope you are satisfied. All right. Thank you. So just we are out of time for the panel discussion, and I think that it's 2 days, great opportunity to talk further and take points a whole lot further and share learnings and best practice amongst each other. But Minister Ndondo, I thought that perhaps you can close the session for us. And just close it for us, sir, just with your humble thoughts of, you know, as an outcome of this 2-day event, what would you like, or what do you think if we had to do today or tomorrow, just given that we're still here tomorrow, today or tomorrow, to make the picture of regional integration on the continent look better when next we meet again? What would that be, sir?
Thank you very much. And I think our meeting here, it's mainly to serve that purpose. We are here as countries to discuss issues only for railways. And when we talk trade, we don't talk individual countries. We're talking movements of goods from one country to the other. So regional integration is the way. So all I can say is to challenge SARA to help countries to come together, to work together, make the operations seamless, because you find that there are delays here and there as goods move from one country to the other. You find that in one country, their operations are structured in one way. When you get to the other country, you find that they are working in another way, and there's changes day in, day out, and customers are always frustrated. So all I can say is to challenge SARA to help us to operate seamlessly in our railway. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Don't be shy. And it seems like that challenge was accepted. So thank you for those closing words, sir. And could I just ask the audience to help me thank the panelists for their contribution and their time with just a warm applause for us.